What does it mean to live a resilient life? I'm Ryan Manion. I lost my brother to war and my mom to cancer, and I've learned a lot about myself along the way. Now, as the CEO of Travis Manion Foundation, I'm on a journey to explore what it means to be resilient against life's many challenges. Join me and some incredible guests as we ask ourselves the hard questions and define what it means to struggle well. All right, we are back with another episode of the Resilient Life podcast. I'm super excited about our guest today, Norm Hooten, most well known for his integral role in the October 1993 Battle of Mogadishu, of which the movie Black Hawk Down was made. And right now, streaming on Netflix is a new documentary called Surviving Black Hawk Down. Norm, have you seen that documentary?
I have not seen it yet, but I hopefully when I get a little time, we'll sit and watch it. I've heard it's very good.
Yeah. So I had a conversation with Larry Perino, and he participated in the documentary. And, you know, and again, I'm going to be super curious to get your thoughts on it once you watch it. But, you know, I wanted to talk to him because, again, obviously you've watched Black Hawk Down, obviously. And, you know, I wanted to get an understanding of like, well, let's start there. Let's start there with the movie. And I'll tell you, I had not seen Black Hawk Down prior to us setting up this interview. I don't do very well with war movies. I used to watch a lot of them, but after losing Travis, I just have trouble watching the battle scenes, and you know it's my thing. But I wanted to watch it, and I did, and I thought it was great. So I'd love to start there and just kind of get your thoughts on it. And again, I also went into it knowing it was a movie, and it's not going to be the correct depiction of what actually took place there. But as it pertains to the movie itself, and I think more what it did to bring light to what took place there. What were your reactions to it? And, you know, tell me a little bit about that process, because your character was a big character in that movie.
Yeah, you know, I want to say basically you hit the nail on the head when you said it was a movie, and it's made for entertainment. I thought it did a pretty good job of capturing kind of the intensity of the battle.
Yeah.
But again, a movie, and my character was really kind of an amalgamation of several guys. You know, I mean, I spent most of my time primarily on the target building and on the first crash site, but there was a lot of stuff going on. And that's, you know, I've heard people say before that, you know, every time I talk to one of the veterans of the Battle of Mogadishu, it seems like it's a different battle. And the truth of the matter is there were many, many different battles playing out at the same time in Mogadishu. And so the movie did a pretty good job of trying to roll all of those in to a 2-hour video or 2-hour movie, but there were a lot of things going on there. So that character was an amalgamation of events and people. But I thought it was pretty well done. And you know, when I was a kid growing up, like most kids, most young men, you were inspired by movies, you know, of things that happened before you. So my generation, it was watching the things that happened in World War II. And at the time, growing up in the Vietnam War, you know, I watched one of the greatest inspirations for me joining the Army and doing what I did was the Green Beret with John Wayne. So hopefully that movie, at first, I think it brought great credit to the men and women of the U.S. Armed Services. So it didn't do anything to make them look bad. And I hope that it was an inspiration to the next generation of warriors going into service for their country. So looking at it from that perspective, I thought it was very well done. I know that I've had people tell me that, hey, I saw that movie when I was in middle school and I joined the Army and went in the Ranger Battalion or went in the Marine Corps. because I saw that movie. So I thought it was good for the military.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. I was talking with a couple of my friends and they were sharing with me that, when they were coming out of OCS down at Quantico, that was made mandatory that they watched Black Hawk Down. So, and I think you hit it on the head when you said like it really captured the intensity of, and I think, I got why that would be an important movie for service members, new service members to watch and understand that, things don't always go as planned and they can be very chaotic. Yeah.
Almost never.
Almost never go as planned. Exactly. And your character was played by Eric Bana. But yeah, it was great to see. And, I agree with you. I think so important that if you can create something that doesn't shine a negative light on our military and can help inspire future generations, I'm all for it. And I think that's the way that Hollywood should be looking at how they produce films like this. I also thought something that was very interesting was that this idea that, the book was 26 characters. There were 26 kind of main characters in the book. And like you said, like your character was an amalgamation of several different people. So I thought they did that very well, for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that, again, going back to the inspiration for our new generation of warriors, it was good. There's so many times you see these movies that can bring discredit to the men and women of the armed services. It's nice to see one that comes out and shines a nice, good light on them.
Yeah, it was great. Well, what I'd love to just kind of dive into now is not the movie so much, but what actually the Battle of Mogadishu, and that was known as Operation Gothic Serpent. And I'd love to just start by asking you, like, how surviving such an intense battle shaped your perspective on life and family as you moved out of that in the months and years that followed.
Yeah, family has always been really, really important to me. It's been a big part of my life. But after that event, I don't think anybody can say that they can go through an event like that and come out of it unchanged. I think it changes all of us, and a lot of times, because we're all individuals, it changes us in different ways. But with me, it reinforced just how important it is to have that strong family around you, because coming through something like that, nobody really thinks about what happens afterwards, and how you deal with it, which has been a big part of my life since then, is studying it and the effects it has on people. But one of the things that I've learned through this process is that if you have that strong family bonds around you, can help you when you come afterwards, because we do a lot of time preparing for the event. Of course, you go through the event, which is a big deal, but then you've got the rest of your life to live. And that's a long, long time. So having a strong family and spending time with family and building relationships, not only with your immediate family, but your extended family and friends, and that network is extremely important. And going through that event just reinforced what I had already believed.
One of the things in watching the documentary that really stuck out to me is that, and again, obviously you get that from the movie, but seeing some of the live footage, there's actually footage from a Somali cameraman who was shooting a bunch of stuff, and they interviewed him. It was super interesting. And, the battle was insane. And, I'm actually shocked that so many survived. And one of the things that stood out to me when it was occurring was that it was around a school. And to see that the Somalis weren't finding a way to reposition or get the kids out of there before the battle was occurring. It's the kind of thing that is like so barbaric that Americans can't understand, and
hard to deal with it,
Yeah.
and it seems to be a common theme in a lot of the places that we find ourselves in these days. We think um, we look at it a little differently. I think the first thing that I'm going to do if I'm going into a pitched gunfight is I'm going to get my loved ones out of there,
Right.
and then I'm going to go and take care of business. But not everybody thinks like that.
Yeah, interestingly enough, in the ambush that took place on the day my brother was killed, it was actually a young boy that had told them to go somewhere, and he was part of the plan.
Yeah,
And
yeah, no, it's a different world, and I don't think that most of the people in this country realize the complications that our guys encounter when they're put in environments like that. So it's almost a damned if you do, damned if you don't proposition. You're doing the very best you can to try to reduce collateral damage and civilian casualties, but at the same time, once they know that you're going to play that way, then they take advantage of that and use it to their benefit.
yeah, and the one thing I was thinking about was like when you experience something like that, how does it not, or did it kind of harden you or change you to a point where like you come out of it almost being frustrated with like the complaints of Americans, right? And the freedoms that we have and the way that we live as a society. Like, do you come back here and say, "Oh my gosh, like there's just so much you guys don't even know about what's happening around the world."
Yeah, you do to some extent, and then you have to step back for a minute and realize that the only way you would ever understand something like that is to put yourself in that position.
Yeah.
So while you want to become frustrated and you look at people around the world, could you not see what's going on? You just can't imagine it. I mean, most people cannot imagine the horrors of war. Even a soldier, before they go into it, they think they know what's coming, but you don't fully understand it until you're in it. And so I always keep that in the back of my mind when I'm talking to people. You just say, well, they just don't know, and the only way they ever will know is to put themselves in that position, and most of them will not.
Yeah. Um, as you came out in the weeks and months that followed, like how did you cope with the emotional toll, and did you have any mental health challenges in the aftermath of everything?
I mean, I was of course, going back to what I said before, you can't come through something like that and not be changed by it.
Yeah.
Um, but I was very fortunate as a kid growing up that I was surrounded by um, people in a small town who had done similar things. Being born in 1960, I had World War II veterans that I thought were very, very old men at the time, and they were in their early 40s. And um, and so I listened to their stories, and they never really talked about their individual exploits, but they talked about the friends they had, the friends that they lost, everything that went wrong. They never talked about things going right. They just talked about how things got screwed up when they hit the beaches of Normandy or when they were in North Africa. And so then listening to guys out of Korea, and then hearing stories from guys that were just a little bit older than me that were coming back from Vietnam, and it all had the same theme. It really put in my mind that they were very resilient. Nothing ever went right. The food was always bad, the weather was always bad. They never felt good, and they were put in these positions where they had to go into combat. Um, and the plan never worked out. And so I was kind of mentally conditioned for that early, that listening to the resilience of these warriors from past generations telling these stories, and I was captivated by them as a young guy, and so it kind of prepared me for it. And then when I joined the Army, I went to Special Forces, and a lot of the guys that were in my unit at the time were legendary soldiers from Vietnam, and they
Wow.
were telling the same kind of stories. They were the old Sante Raiders and the guys that had been in SOG and Green Berets and Rangers from Vietnam era, and they never. I can't remember hearing the story where everything went the way it was supposed to go. And so um, while I had never really experienced anything quite like it, I had heard stories of it. So it prepared me for it without even really knowing that I was being prepared for it. And then when I went there, I was very, very fortunate to be surrounded by some of the best soldiers of their generation.
One of the things that I found that was super interesting about your Army career is, so you enlisted in the Army in 1980, and then you joined a Special Forces group in 87. Is that correct?
So I went to the Green Berets in 1981.
Okay.
So I joined the Army in 80 on the delayed entry program, and then I went to active duty in January of 1981 and was in the Green Berets. So went in straight off the street in what they call the SF Baby program. They call it the 18 X-ray program today, I think.
Yeah,
But
I know.
I was in fifth group, did about 5 years in fifth group, and then went to the Army Special Mission Unit in, about five and a half, 6 years after I was in.
And then I saw it says you retired for the first time as a master sergeant in 2001. But then you were basically called back up, right?
That's correct. So I got out in 2001.
Was that prior to September? Oh, in August. Wow.
August of 2001.
Wow.
And I went to pharmacy school.
Yeah.
And it had a lot to do with my family. I had young kids at the time, and my wife had gone through, a lot of times what the families go through is as difficult or more so than what the actual soldiers on the ground go through. And it had really, really scared her to death. And she was not down for another 10 years in the Army. And she said something to me one time that really resonated with me, and it was really kind of a driving factor for me leaving the Army. She said, when we first started together here in the unit, when we would go to team parties, it was fun. We were all young couples. We had young families. We were living as normal a life as we could. She goes, but now when I go, I'm one of the few people out of our group that isn't a widow, and I'm just not ready to continue doing that. I want the kids to do it, and so I had to make a decision on the Army or my family, and it was hands down, no choice at the time. I had done everything that I went to do in the Army. I was fulfilled, and I was ready to commit to being a dad and a husband. And so I got out, had no idea what I was going to do, because I remember telling Bonnie, I said, I don't know what I would do if I get out. I've done this since I was a kid, and I don't know how to do anything else. And she said, well, and she was a pharmacist at the time. She said, why don't you go to pharmacy school? And I almost laughed because it was so far off the beaten path for me that I never even dreamed of doing it. And but she convinced me to do it, and so I did all the prereqs prior to getting out, and then I went to Campbell University School of Pharmacy. Started in August of 2001, and then a month later, of course, 9/11 happened, and then I was on terminal leave, so I got recalled back to the Army.
Wow.
And that kind of put that on hold for a long time. But I got out the first time in August of 01.
So did she, understanding that, when you're getting out in August of 2001, your wife, Bonnie, is kind of saying, hey, we need to change course correct here. And after September 11th, does she just get on board? Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah.
I mean, she knew that. I mean, I wasn't I had a lot of say in the matter, but at the same time, we both realized that the earth had moved beneath our feet, and it was, everything that we thought about at that time, moving forward, had changed, and the commitment to our country was first on both of our minds, and she was like, okay, let's hunker down and get ready to do this.
Yeah. There was a quote from a podcast that you did, and you actually said that spouses are the most heroic and unsung people in the military. And it super resonated with me because, my mom was a Marine Corps spouse for 30 years. And looking back, I didn't realize it. She's since passed, but, I look at the sacrifices that she made, because people would say, oh, what did your mom do? Like, what did she do for a living? And I said, she did whatever she could when we moved every 2 years. And, I said, she did everything. She was like the receptionist at the dentist's office. She was the teacher's aide. She just found a way. And gosh, I wish she was here for me to tell her, like, how much of she was the captain of our ship. And I appreciate that you said that and you recognize that.
No, they are the rock that everything else is built on. And didn't realize it early on, but as I moved through my career and then, of course, later in life, the second hardest day probably of my life was going to Mogadishu and losing all my friends. They weren't just and as you know, when you're in the Marine Corps or in the Army or any of the services, and you're out there, the people that you work with become more than friends. They're your extended family.
Yeah.
You know their families, you know their moms, their dads, their kids, their wives, and they become very, very close to you. And so Mogadishu was a very, very difficult day for me personally, because we didn't just lose soldiers, we lost close friends and colleagues. But that was the second hardest day of my life. The hardest day of my life was coming home and facing their families and seeing what it did to them, not just in that moment, but for generations to follow. And it just it devastates it. And they say that the greatest sacrifice you can make is to give your life for your country. But I would argue that and I resonate very much with Travis's story, because I have a son who graduated from the Naval Academy, and he is also currently serving in the Marine Corps. So they're all important to me, but I can very much empathize with the story of your family. And I think the greatest sacrifice that you can do is offer up a child onto the altar of freedom. I can't imagine it, and I don't know that I would be able to survive something like that. So I'm very, very, again, humbled to be here with you and have such deep respect for you and your family. And I just can't imagine what that loss would be like.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't easy. And, I can feel, when you talk about the worst day, or the second worst day was Mogadishu, the worst day was telling the families. And, I'll never forget when we got the knock at the door. It was one of my dad's friends, a lieutenant colonel, because my dad was still in. And so he had friends that, I'll never forget our good family friend, General Paypack. He was a general at the time. He saw the casualty lists and he saw, Travis's name on it. And he said the first thing he did was he picked up the phone to call my dad. And he said, wait, I can't call him. So he called another close friend of theirs that lived close by and said, you have to be there. Well, the official casualty officer, though, was a classmate of Travis's from the Naval Academy. And an image that is seared into my head from that day is after he had shared the news and he walked out to his car, which was parked out on the street. And I looked back and, obviously chaos had kind of erupted in our house and there was a lot going on. But I looked back at the street and I saw him, and he was sitting in his car and he just had his head on the steering wheel. And I'll never forget that image and the pain and the sadness that I felt for him after, I had just learned that Travis was gone, but I looked at him and I so much felt what he was going through as, again, someone who went through 4 years with him at the academy, was now a Marine, and that brotherhood that exists. So, you know, I get it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know you do, and I pray that that I never have to feel it. I'm very grateful for everything you guys are doing now. You know, in the aftermath of it. But just again, humble to be talking to you.
Yeah, you as well. So okay, well let's talk. You get out, and you finally get out after your second time out, and you go back to pharmacy school. And you are at you started pharmacy school at 52 and finished up at what, age 57? Around
Yeah.
there?
So I when I got recalled back to the Army, with about a year later, I transitioned out of the Army and took a full-time position as the national training coordinator, one of the national training coordinators for the Federal Air Marshal Service. And I did that for 7 or 8 years, and then went over and was a deputy director of the King Abdullah Special Operations Training Center in Amman, Jordan, for a few years. And then what I saw when I was over there in Jordan was we had a lot of these civilian contracting companies that were coming through there. The names that we all know, but guys that were working as contractors, coming through our facility, doing their train ups, going over to fulfill contracts in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I saw a lot of special operations guys that were coming through there who had substance use issues, serious substance use issues, primarily with prescription opioids, and a lot of them had evolved into illicit drug use, and many times because they couldn't get access to the prescription drugs. So really troubled me, and ended up going back to pharmacy school, as you said, I started in 2012, so I'd have been 52, and graduated pharmacy school in 2016, and then did 2 residencies, focusing on PTSD, chronic pain management, and substance use disorders, and the nexus of those 3, because oftentimes they're joined at the hip.
I love, because I was honestly, it was interesting because I saw that originally that when you got out, you became a pharmacist, and I'm like, that's so interesting, and I couldn't find the correlation, right? And I was like, and then after doing more digging and seeing that, you know, just how those kind of 2 worlds collided for you, and what you were seeing, and that, you know, really your second career played such an integral part of what you had seen, and with the military and service members that were leaving. Why do you think, you know, and this is a broader question, but, you know, why do you think this happens to veterans? And do you think veterans, are they affected at a disproportionate rate when compared to civilians, when you talk about this idea of, I mean, again, we can point to certain things, but, okay, I guess my question is going to be this. What can we as a society change to curb what's happening to veterans in crisis with, you know, opioid addictions and substance abuse problems, as you see it from the, you know, from the pharmacist side of things?
Yeah, you know, when I started down the road the second time in pharmacy school, I thought that was going to be, I'd go to pharmacy school, I'd do a couple residencies, I was really committed to studying it, you know, and I thought that it would be an easy answer. I don't know, Ryan, that I'm any closer to the answer today than I was when I started, but I know that I had to try, right? I mean, I didn't want to, you know, get towards the end of my life and think there was something that I could have done, because many of the guys that I saw with these issues were close friends of mine, guys that I would never have suspected of it. And I didn't want to say, you know, that I didn't at least try to figure it out. And I've seen some correlations, but I really still study it. You know, still, it's one of the things that keeps me up at night trying to figure it out. You know, why two people can stand on the same square meter of ground and go through the same experience, but you ask them what happened, and both of them tell you a different story, and both of them are telling you the truth. Is what they perceived as reality at the time, right? And that has a lot to do with it. So one of the things I could say is that having that close network of friends and family around you, and not only after the fact, but prior to the event, can change the way you see things, right? And how you perceive them really is a determining factor on what happens to you afterwards, right? And again, I don't have a scientific study that shows that or anything, but I do know that the way they perceive the event directly determines the outcome.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And I think a lot of that is, can be determined by how they may have been raised or things they saw as when they were developing, what their expectations, how they manage expectations of life and events. And again, I can't give you a real solid answer on it, but it's a very, very difficult and multifaceted problem.
No, I think that's such interesting. Like the way they perceived the event determines the outcome. I think that's pretty profound. And when you think about it, I mean, that stretches beyond the military community too, I think, with just, and.
When I first started studying this stuff, I don't know if the numbers are the same, but I would imagine they're close. I think there are around 125 suicides daily in the United States, and 22 of those were veterans.
Yep.
So roughly, 20? I'm not great at math, but 20%. But veterans only make up 0.5% of the population, so they're very much overrepresented when it comes to suicides.
And I think that number largely remains around the same. I don't know the national average, but for the veteran suicide rate, it hasn't changed much. I will say that. But I think that, again, there's the research and the scientific data, but I think the anecdotal data is super important too. And, I get to witness every day in the veterans that we work with, veterans who come in and, I wouldn't necessarily say they're in crisis, but, we have veterans that come in and like, they're just not in a good place. And I can see the transformation that happens when they find our community. And sometimes I think largely as a society, we overlook some of these simple things like community and relationships. And you keep speaking back to it, like your family unit, it's so important. Like, what did you have before this incident or this time in service occurred? Like, what did your family unit look like? And what did it look like when you came back? And, the same goes for, as you're taking off that uniform, like what do your relationships look like? And what does your community that surrounds you look like? And that's why our organization exists, to provide that community to our service members as they take the uniform off. And so, it's super important.
Another thing that concerns me is that when you look at veteran suicide rates, the number of enlisted personnel versus officers, and that's probably my next big look is that. But of course, enlisted guys are we outnumber officers by a lot, so maybe that has something to do with it. But I'd like to study the correlation. How does it? Is it more prevalent in the enlisted ranks in the officer? And if so, why is it more prevalent? It's but it seems to be anecdotally, as you said, that a lot of this stuff is happening with enlisted soldiers.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about some fun stuff. So Norm, you and I first met this past December at the Army Navy game, which was, gosh, what a great game. What a great outcome. I'm sure you're feeling the same way. Well, listen, you got a son that's a Marine that went to the Naval Academy. So
I have one of both. I have one who went to West Point and one who went to Navy. So
how do you show up at that game? I feel like you're rooting for Army. Come on now.
Well, I really don't. So I'm a go Army, go Navy kind of
Okay.
Dan. And of course, I never went to either one. I was an enlisted guy, so I don't feel like a traitor either way. But I just love the tradition of the game. I mean, I was first exposed to it when my son was in high school. I'd never, I'd known people who'd gone to the academies, but I didn't know anything about them. And when my son got ready to graduate high school, of course, he's looking at the academies, and we went to both of them, and it just awesome tradition. And on that one day of the year, they go to war with each other, but every other day they're on the same team, as they say. And you go to, I have a daughter who goes to the University of Alabama, and really cool school. You go in there, you see all their national championships, but then when you go to like Navy Marine Stadium and you see all the battles around the stadium, it really gives you goosebumps. And so it's a different ballgame. And if anybody hasn't been to that particular event, that's got to be on their all-time bucket list. I just love the tradition. Love both teams. Always, I don't feel like there's any losers in that game. Never been to one of those games where I walked away disappointed.
No, never. It's quite arguably my favorite day of the year. I love it so much. And not only did we get to meet that day, but your Hooten Young, your American whiskey and cigar brand, came in and was a awesome sponsor for our tailgate. We had 5,000 people there. You and I got to share the stage a little bit and talk to the crowd, and it was just such an awesome day.
Yeah, it was. Loved it, and looking forward to doing it again this year. I can't wait.
So let's talk a little bit about Hooten Young. Like, what inspired you to start this brand?
Well, I've always enjoyed a good cigar and an occasional whiskey, and but I wasn't really an avid cigar smoker. And I had a son, like I said, that was at West Point, and we've always been very close as a family, and I've always been very, very active as a father. But when he came home from leave from West Point one time, I walked in the house and I could smell cigar smoke, and I looked at Bonnie and I said, "Hey, somebody been smoking cigars?" She goes, "Yeah, Noah's out back smoking a cigar." So I went back out there with him. He had a couple, and then we smoked a few, and realized after we got through smoking a couple of cigars that I had spent several hours in just deep philosophical conversation with a kid that I'd been around his whole life, but I'd never really connected with him on that personal level before. I was too busy being a dad, and he was too busy being a son. And it really brought us closer together. And then we started a tradition of doing it. I connected with some more parents, another guy in particular named Tim Young. His son was also at West Point. And we started hanging out on the back porch, enjoying a good smoke and a whiskey every once in a while. And then on the 25th anniversary of the Battle of Mogadishu, I wanted to share that experience with my buddies. So we had another friend of ours hand roll 300 cigars. We made up a label, stuck them on there ourselves, and then took them up to the event, never thinking that we were going to sell them. We were just giving them away as gifts. And then we started getting a lot of requests for boxes of those cigars, guys that were saying, "Hey, I was there, I had it, I want another one, or I want a box. I've got a buddy that wants them." And so we just started it kind of by accident. It started out as a gift, and then we started making them and using some of the proceeds to help veterans causes. And it shortly afterward, we did the same thing with the whiskey, but really did not start out thinking we're going to go into the whiskey and cigar business. We just thought we're gonna take some stuff up to some buddies at a reunion and have a good time.
It's so funny because my dad enjoys a good cigar, and I can so feel what you're talking about and having that conversation with your son, and really, because everybody knows that as the evening winds down, my dad likes to turn and he'll turn and say, "Hey, let's go have a cigar." And you know what that means. It's like that's when you're going outside with my dad and it's time to talk. And
Yeah, it
yeah.
really forces you to put the phones down and connect on a personal level that you don't normally do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So it obviously organic grassroots inception, but you end up making pretty good whiskey and a pretty good cigar. And yeah, it's good
Yeah,
stuff. I got
no,
to taste it at the tailgate. So
yeah, thanks. We enjoy it, and it does allow us to connect with our friends and then make new friends. So,
what's your favorite bottle of whiskey in the lineup?
oh man, they're all good, but I like the first whiskey we came out with. It's a 12-year old product. It's 92 proof, and it is just no ice, just sipping whiskey. It's my favorite of the lineup, but they're all good. It depends on kind of what you're. Most of them spun off of it because I'd have friends call me up and say, "Hey, I like it, but it's not strong enough for me. I want something with a little more horsepower to it." So we would say, "Okay, well, we'll make a Castle Street version of it, and instead of being 92 proof, it'll be 125 proof."
Wow.
And then I had buddies that would say, "I like the rye whiskey," so we would produce a rye, and it's really all just organic growth and decision making. We were acquired last year, and the new partners, ironically, is Don Young, no relation to Tim, and his good friend Derek Dyer, and Don is, by the way, a Navy guy, so we go back and forth at each other in fun, but they've picked up the torch and are taking it to new levels and doing really great things with it. And I'm, of course, back in with them as a partner as well. So still very, very much involved. In fact, more so involved with it than I was before. One of the things they asked me when they came in to partner was that, "Hey, look, we really need you to retire from the VA and come on full time." So I retired about a month ago and went on full time with the whiskey and cigars.
I love it. Hooten Young, you can get it. I've been on your website. The bottle's beautiful too, which I think is important when you're selling whiskey. So yeah,
Yeah, the whole experience of it,
yeah,
and really we wanted to honor the men and women of the armed services, but we didn't want to put anything out there that they weren't going to fully enjoy, and so we take a lot of care in developing the product and making sure that it's a great experience for people that are really, really special to us.
I love it. Norm, as we wrap up, I think about the life that you've lived and all the different things that you've done, and it's interesting. You went from a long career in the Army. You were part of one of the most infamous battles that our country has faced. You then went on to have a second career supporting the men and women that you served alongside of through your work as a pharmacist and with the VA. And, I often think a lot about this idea of legacy, and I'd love to know how you define legacy, and ultimately, like, what do you hope yours will be?
Ryan, I've been very, very blessed to grow up as a young kid in West Texas, surrounded by people who had done amazing things for their country. And then I was lucky enough to be able to live that life with some of the best men and women of our generation. And then seeing all the things that they've gone through, I would hope that I would never do anything that would not make them proud of me. And there are many of them out there that didn't get the opportunity. They were not lucky enough to have the opportunities that I've had to live as long as I've lived and do things that I've gotten to do. And that is never ever something I forget or take lightly. I know that there were many people that I served with that would love to just spend one more day with their families, one more day with their friends, and I was given the gift of being able to go on well beyond that, and I do not take that for granted, and I hope that every day that I live, I do nothing to bring discredit to them, their lives, their communities, or their families. So I try to live as honorably as I can and do as much as I can to help their families and then inspire the next generation of men and women, because this is a long tradition, and I'm just a very small part of it. And God willing, it will go on long after we're all gone.
Well, I appreciate that, and I can say as a Gold Star sister, you represent this community well, and it's an honor to know you. It's an honor to have you on the show, and I'm looking forward to toasting with you next year at the Army Navy game.
Yes, ma'am. And I am, again, very humbled to be here talking with you now. And thank you very much for the sacrifice your family has made for our great nation.
Thanks so much, Norm.